Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to my Victober wrap-up and edition 2 of Victorian Bro Code. Last year I started working on my own Victorian Bro Code after reading some Victorian classics, and I'm going to update that today with 10 new Bro Code rules. 10 new Victorian Bro Code rules. But before I do that, I want to break down the 5 Victorian classics that I read or listened to this month. I was at the gym the other day, and I was setting my PR in the bench press, and I was talking to this guy about Victorian literature. And he looked at me and he said, "Why do you read Victorian literature, bro?" And I said, "Bro, it's like bulking up. You gotta read the Victorian literature. You gotta bulk up before you can cut and define. You gotta add that muscle, and that's what Victorian literature does." So I read 5 Victorian classics. Actually, I listened to one as an audiobook. Let's do that one first. So the Victorian classic I listened to as an audiobook was The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. This was a really intricate, involved, long mystery involving the disappearance of an Indian diamond called the Moonstone. Now I gotta tell you, man, there's some colonialism talking here. There's some looking at other races and other cultures, definitely through a colonialist point of view, so you need to be aware of that. It was the Victorian era after all. But in this story, we get this really intricate story about the disappearance of this diamond called the Moonstone, and who did it, and who found it, and where it went, and how it wrecks people's lives. It was really interesting. I listened to it as an audiobook. I did a lot of driving this month. I listened to it as an audiobook, and I really, really enjoyed it. Maybe if it's too long, you need to also be aware it's kind of told in a epistolatory, there we go, format, which people kind of write letters, they have journal entries, and things like that. But it was really, really interesting, and I liked it. So book number 2, and the first book I read in physical format, was North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. Gaskell is a great, great writer. I really enjoyed Cranford, just funny and brilliant. I didn't enjoy North and South so much. North and South kind of follows the story of a young woman named Margaret Hale, who is beautiful. Everybody acknowledges this is a really beautiful woman. But she has problems. Her problems largely had to do with poverty brought about by circumstances having to do with her family and her father. And she had to move from an idyllic countryside home she shares with her parents to an gritty industrial city in the north. And at first she resents it. She hates living in the industrial city. She hates everything about it. She gets to know the people. She gets to know those workers. She realizes the workers in the industrial north of England have problems. And those problems are oftentimes overlooked by the factory owners and the industrialists. And she says, no, that's not the way it should be. And she gets involved in, anyway, there's a romance involved, and all kinds of stuff happens. You know, I didn't like the book all that much. I thought it was good, and I thought there were lots of things about it that were good, but it just seemed like kind of a mess. Like there were lots of things that were thrown in and didn't necessarily have anything to do with one another. It was a little bit confusing. But the social message, really strong. The third Victorian classic I read was The Black Arrow by Robert Louis Stevenson. Stevenson is one of my go-to Victorian authors. I love those tales of adventures and kind of boyhood. Reminds me of being a young broseph myself. The Black Arrow involves a young man named Richard Shelton, and he's like on his way to becoming a knight, and his dad's dead, and he falls in with his people who may or may not be good, and then he deals with these other people who may or may not be good, and then he finds a best friend, and they go on adventures, and things happen, and there are battles, there's fighting, and there are people getting cut in half and eviscerated and shot in the heart with arrows, and it's really, really entertaining. A little confusing, set during the War of the Roses period. It mixes in some real-life characters like Richard III, for instance, but it's a really good kind of riveting story, and it's not very long. My 4th Victorian classic was Framley Parsonage by one of my favorite Victorian authors, Anthony Trollope. That Trollope knew how to do the work, man. Put in the time, he refined, he built up his bulk, and then he defined and cut down so he could see every rippling muscle in his text. What a great writer Trollope was. Framley Parsonage, not my favorite. Not my favorite story in the Barchester Chronicles. I'm sorry to say, it seemed a little bit too involved in politics, which sometimes went right over my head. I mean Victorian politics, you know, the 1860s or 70s or whatever, not necessarily an area of my expertise. But the story itself was pretty compelling, and there were really good characters, really vividly drawn. It's always Trollope has a sense of humor. And if you read Dr. Thorne, some of the characters from Dr. Thorne and other stories in the Barchester Chronicles make a reappearance, and some of them even hook up. Not in, in the Victorian way, not in the way we talked about it. Anyway, it's a good story. Not my favorite Trollope, but a good story. And my fifth book, my fifth Victorian classic, is one of my favorite Victorian novels of all times now. And that's New Grub Street by George Gissing. George Gissing is my man, he's my homie, he's my bro. That man could write some cynical, hard-hitting, piercing prose and create really interesting stories. New Grub Street follows the lives of writers living in London. And kind of, I think, like the late 19th century. And they're all trying to make their own way. Some are committed to literature, some are just looking at writing almost as like a dodge, as a way to make money to advance themselves socially. Those committed to literature suffer for their art. Man, I'm telling you what they suffer. There's a lot of suffering in New Grub Street. And in the end, you may find the resolution to be somewhat unsatisfying. If you like happy endings, if you like justice, you might not care for what happens in New Grub Street. But it's just a great, great book. And George Gissing is my favorite, one of my favorite Victorian authors now. So now, on to the second edition of the Victorian Bro Code. Rule number 1, bros should read Robinson Crusoe. I didn't know this. I've never read it. But apparently it is the I Ching for brodom. I learned this by reading The Moonstone by Wilkie. One of the characters, one of the great characters in that novel is Gabriel Betteredge. He's like that, works at the house of these rich people, and he loves Robinson Crusoe, and he goes to Robinson Crusoe for advice, for the answers to questions, and he finds them there. It's amazing. So Robinson Crusoe is definitely a book bros should add to their reading lifting. Victorian Bro Code rule number 2, there's no money in literature. Bros should know there's no money in writing literature. You just can't make a living. It's heartbreaking and soul crushing and health destroying. Bros should probably avoid writing literature. I learned this from reading New Grub Street by George Gissing. Again, an excellent book, but literature just apparently doesn't pay. Not as much as like just being a hack pays apparently. Anyway, bros, no, there's no money in literature. Rule number 3, bros shouldn't bully their smaller bros because one day they might want to marry them. Shocking. Shocking, I know, but we can't judge. We have to just read and learn and take these things in. I learned this by reading The Black Arrow, in which our main character, Richard Shelton, is off on adventures with a smaller dude who he's become friends with, and at one point they have a disagreement, and Richard's gonna beat that guy down, and later on, he decides to marry him. I know, read it and find out. Rule number 4, bros don't let their own existential crises of faith ruin their families. I learned this from reading North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, in which one of the characters essentially decides to give up on his faith, and he has to give up his job, and he has to give up his home, he has to move his family far away where they suffer. Don't do it, bro. Don't sacrifice your family because you have your own, questions and doubts. Figure something else out. Bro Code rule number 5, Victorian Bro Code rule number 5. Bros don't ask other bros to co-sign loans. Don't do it. I was reading Framley Parsonage, and I thought to myself, oh God, don't co-sign that loan for that guy. He's a weasel. He's not a real bro. He's going to take advantage of you. He's going to ruin you. And he pretty much did. I was screaming at the book the whole time because I knew. And still, he did it. Don't ask your bros to co-sign loans. Victorian Bro Code rule number 6. Even bros need to be careful when taking drinks made for them by other bros. This is really good advice for young ladies, particularly who are going out to bars, who are in college and having a good time. Be really careful about who mixes you a drink, who hands you a drink. Maybe don't take drinks from people you don't know very well, because in The Moonstone by Wilkie, one of our main characters takes a drink made for him by somebody else, and it has disastrous consequences. So bros, be careful. Don't just take drinks from your other bros, particularly if you don't know them all that well. They may not be up to any good. Bro Code rule number 7, don't steal another bro's boat. This is a metaphor. I know, you didn't think I know what a metaphor was, but I did. I looked it up. What I mean by don't steal another bro's boat is don't take away another guy's livelihood, another guy's love, the way he makes his money. I learned this from reading The Black Arrow, in which somebody steals somebody else's boat and he feels bad about it, and the other guy whose boat he stole is upset and hates the guy forever. No matter what the one guy does for him, he still hates him because he stole his boat. Don't steal another bro's boat. Whew, rule number 8. This is a big one. Oh, this made me so mad when I was reading New Grub Street by George Gissing. Bro Code rule number 8 in the 2nd edition of the Victorian Bro Code. Don't talk your bros down to their wives. Don't go behind their backs and tell their wives all the problems that your bros have and all the things they're doing wrong. You will undermine that relationship. And that's wrong. That's not bro behavior. That's not bro behavior in the 19th century. It's not bro behavior in the 21st century. Don't do it. Bro Code rule number 9, which seems to contradict one of the rules from last year's Bro Code rules. But this one is that bros cannot always listen to their mothers. At some point, you gotta break away. I learned this from reading Framley Parsonage, in which Lord Lumpkin? Yes, which Lord Lumpkin finally has to tell his mom, "No, Mom, I'm gonna marry whoever I want to and you can't stop me." And that works out beautifully because he was right. He listened to his heart and not his mom. And sometimes, bros, you gotta break away. You can't always do what your mom tells you to do. Sometimes you gotta break away, even though you gotta respect your mom, and she knows a lot of stuff. And finally, Bro Code rule number 10. Bros know that women are strong. They're strong and they're powerful. Again, I learned this from reading Framley Parsonage. Read Framley Parsonage, you realize that you're reading about all these men who are kind of don't know what to do, and they're making bad decisions, and it's their wives, it's their mothers, it's their sisters, it's the women in their lives who are holding them together. These women go forward, they do what has to be done, and they stand up for their families, and they do the work that has to be done, even though it's hard, even though they know it's difficult, even though they don't expect anything back from it. They do the work because women are strong, and a real bro, Victorian or today, knows that women are strong. There you go. There is a 2nd edition of the Victorian Bro Code and my Victober wrap-up. I look forward to your comments in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching. Yeah!